Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to another sequestered version episode of the DMZ.
You're not accepting quarantine as or self-isolation. You're going with sequester.
Any of them are acceptable in my book. I mix and match, Bill.
So are you holed up in Virginia or West Virginia?
I'm in West Virginia, which is good because I can get outside. Did you hear my kids? By the way, this is the thing about. I think there are different experiences because I'm told that Fitzgerald was quarantined during the Spanish flu, and Shakespeare wrote King Lear during some sort of plague or something. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that they were not homeschooling kids at the same time. Because let me tell you, it is a different experience.
Now, John Quincy Adams did not homeschool his kids, but he had a lot of opinions about how the kids should be homeschooled.
I bet.
He did take so he was taken by John Adams to Europe for his schooling. So anyway, some of the greats, were involved in some way.
Yeah. Well, Trump says a lot of bad and irresponsible things, but when he noted that there may be more suicides, I'm starting to understand where he's coming from.
So I know you, Matt, but I always work out of the house, but now kids are 24/7. My wife's working from home too. I've always had to do a lot of the cooking because my wife essentially has two jobs, being on the city council, and I'm not an exceptional cook. I can do certain things, but I'm not I'm not a maestro. But I usually lean on takeout 2-3 times a week just to get through. And out of extra precaution, we're not doing that. So I almost every day my workday kind of stops around 3, where I'm like, oh God, what am I going to cook tonight? And that's just one extra factor gumming up the works during this time.
It's just I tweeted today. Hey there! I tweeted today this a GIF of Bill Murray saying,
right now, I'm sorry, my daughter Laz is talking over you. Matt's trying to talk.
Hear him.
Yeah, because I got headphones.
Oh.
Can you let me do this, please, Laz?
Can I say one thing?
What's the one thing?
You guys should be talking about happy things, not sad things. You should be talking about our new kittens.
We do have new kittens.
Oh, we covered that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I did a GIF of Bill Murray from Groundhog Day just being like, it's Groundhog Day again. And that's kind of how it feels, man. It's like I'm blessed to have my wife is actually an amazing cook, and we've eaten every meal. I think I took the kids through a Starbucks drive-through one time in the past 10 days. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we've eaten every single meal, no takeout, no delivery. Mm. Every meal here. The food is great, but it means dishes 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. And there's no let me just get through this and then tomorrow I'm going on vacation, or tomorrow the vacation, the break is going for a walk. And we'll take what we can get.
You're doing the family walk?
No. I mean, every once in a while, I will go myself alone for a walk, and it's friggin' divine. I'll listen to podcasts.
Well, I've not taken advantage of that. Gina Louise took a walk a couple of days ago. We're trying to get the kids to take walks, but they're not being cooperative on that front. But yesterday was not like the other days. In that the Senate passed a $2 trillion, in the words of Mitch McConnell, not a stimulus. Don't call it a stimulus. This is emergency relief, not a stimulus.
I think but isn't that I mean, isn't that a fair description? Because, I mean, I know that there may be political reasons for parsing the language here, but isn't that actually true?
I mean, you could say as a literal matter, we are doing this because people are in need and we're giving them relief. But as an economic matter, it is a stimulative act. It is an act of massive deficit spending that will increase the percent growth of GDP relative to what you would have otherwise have happened. I mean, I guess this preserves the ability for Republicans to say at the next financial-driven downturn, to say we have no obligation to engage in stimulus here. We didn't do that before. But I think the more reasonable policy-oriented conclusion is when you're in a crisis that is going to severely impact your economy, a quick blast of spending is a good thing to do.
And, you know, but I would say like that may or may not be true. But this is different. I mean, people literally can't work. Maybe they want to work. Maybe they want to open their business. The government is telling them you cannot do the thing that is going to make you money, and therefore
that's the difference.
To make up for that, we will send you money for not doing that.
I mean, that is a key difference, that it's because of a government-driven act that you have to do another government-driven act. In conservative framing, you know, maybe two wrongs make a right. But in like 2008, you know, it wasn't a direct government act that caused the global market crash, but you still had people who wanted to work who couldn't work. It wasn't a question of, you know, human will or laziness that was preventing people from work. Jobs did not exist. And so it made sense for a government act to ensure that people could get by until government could improve, and also to create some government-created jobs to help that process along. And, you know, I can understand the conservative fear that when do you pull the plug on that? When do we get back on our own 2 feet? But that occurred. I mean, we didn't become a socialist state because we had a giant stimulus package. We did, you know, ease our way out of it and got back to, you know, what is by and large a regular economy.
What about the debt and the deficit? That's the thing. I mean, I've been criticizing Trump about this before coronavirus. So I think that, you know, I guess Keynesian theory would be that, like, during good times, you tighten your belt, and then during bad times you would spend. But we don't ever tighten the belt. We never cut spending, and this happens particularly when you have a Republican president, actually, like Donald Trump. Is there, I mean, like, will there be a time when all of a sudden that's the fear, I think. That's what Paul Ryan used to talk about. We got to tackle this debt before it tackles us. I mean, like, at some point, does it become just unsustainable to have all of this debt?
I mean, I want to answer that, but before I do, just so I know, do you support this package or not?
Yeah. I mean, you're the first. I haven't thought about it. I don't have a vote. I haven't written a column about it yet. Right. But I don't see any. I don't see any reason not to do this now.
But you're concerned what the after effects will be.
Yeah, I mean, and not just specifically because of this, but this is just the latest example of, like, trillions of dollars. I mean, like, I guess in other words, what you were saying is that a lot of conservatives are upset that this could mess up the incentives, right? That it could be like an incentive for people not to work because they're going to get welfare handouts. My bigger concern isn't that there may be people who take advantage of the system. It's simply that we're never going to rein in spending and we just keep spending more, and this is the latest example. And like, do we ever have to pay the bill for that? Do our grandkids ever have to pay the bill for that, or not? Is this money we owe ourselves, and it's basically deficits don't matter or whatever?
Well, and there's lots of economic debate about this. I mean, first I would say just look at the history of the last 40 years, going back to Reagan. Reagan ran up deficits, essentially for foreign policy reasons. To some extent, domestically, there were the tax cuts in the first term, but he pulled back on those tax cuts in the second term while the military spending went up. He kind of left that deficit bag in George H.W. Bush's hands. George H.W. and the Democrats said, okay, this is too much deficit spending. We're going to tighten up the reins here. George H.W. Bush, are going to break my promise on taxes, allow for taxes to go up, and paid a political price for that, but he did do something to begin to shrink the deficit. And then Bill Clinton abandons his promise for a middle-class tax cut to try to win back those Ross Perot voters, and they do more tax increases, largely on the wealthy, and they do balance the budget. They do start to have a surplus at a time when the economy was growing. It's like that's the time when you want to do it. You don't want to be so austere that you kill your economic growth, but that didn't happen in the 90s. And George W. Bush then says, I'm going to have a party with Bill Clinton surplus for no obvious reason. And you create big deficits for political reasons. And that makes it harder to use your Keynesian tools when the crash comes, as it did in 2008. Now, having said that, we use those tools anyway. George Bush had a stimulus in his second term. He did hand out more checks. And Obama, of course, had the Recovery Act. And this feeds the notion of what's known as modern monetary theory, which is, to be overly simplistic, a sort of deficits don't matter argument. I know it's more complicated than that, and I am not intelligent enough to articulate it properly. But
even the experts... even the experts who can explain it, they don't really know the answer to the fundamental question I've asked.
And it's still a minority view amongst economists. Most economists, even progressive economists, say there is a point where debt and deficit do matter. It's not just something that is so elastic that you can just spend yourself into oblivion and it never has an impact. But I do think that we had very high debt to GDP ratios under Obama, and we're still standing. You could push it pretty far without killing yourself, but Obama did start to whittle it down. And you might argue Republicans had a hand in that. They pushed him, but through bipartisan means, the stimulus was shrunken, and the deficit to GDP ratio got down to where you would have had it if you had enacted Simpson-Bowles, that centrist deficit reduction plan. They didn't do Simpson-Bowles. They did the sequester, but they got it down to that point, and instead of trying to maintain it, here comes Donald Trump and Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell saying, hey, let's have more tax cuts for no obvious reason. So we're still sort of stuck in this cycle. I think we could get to a place. It is mathematically possible and politically possible to get to a place where you do keep a relative budget balance. You don't necessarily be super austere and pile up surpluses, but you could be in the realm of budget balance, which makes it at least politically easier to do the Keynesian blast because you're not already piling up massive amounts of red ink. Instead, we keep pulling back from that place, and then here is the risk for right now, because interest rates have been pretty low for a long time, understandably after a financial crisis, though they've been trying to inch it up. And now the Fed has, I think, blown through most of its obvious set of tools right now. We've gone to $2 trillion in the government emergency relief package. What if that's not enough? What if this is so bad that this only is like a pea shooter? Then what do you do? That's the real fear, that you will run out of tools because you didn't stockpile your arsenal in the better times.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Bill, thank you for coming on our Zoom call this week.
Oh, that was lots of fun. Both Matt and I have Patreons, although Matt's is far more popular than mine. And this is exclusive to our Patreon supporters. And I'm trying to build mine up. If I may do a plug early in the show, I'm starting a new podcast. It's not going to be up anytime soon. I got a lot of work to do on it. But it's a history-based podcast about great moments in American history, great achievements that were achieved through pragmatism. And I know that's not the greatest elevator pitch in the world, but these are really great stories. And they're stories that don't get told. Like, you don't know these stories. There's not like, there might be a few of them where, like, the basic outlines. But generally speaking, these are stories that aren't even brought up in any kind of history class or blog post or social conversation, because they just don't serve anyone's ideological interest to do so. But they're really rich and fascinating, and it's like writing a book to research the stories and then do the audiobook yourself to do the podcast. So it's going to take me a lot of time. And the more financial support I can have while doing it, the easier it's going to be. So I'm trying to encourage more Patreon supporters by doing these Zoom calls with you.
Yeah. So our call this week was really cool. I guess we had 5, you, me, and 5 people, listeners, supporters. Many of them were quite prestigious and friends of the show. So we had a really good discussion. Not just you and I started off talking for 15 minutes, and then we spent 15 minutes just in discussion. And we talked about Joe Biden, his sort of strategy, doing that podium indoors, in his library. And we talked about Trump's approval ratings, which were going up, and whether that's predictive of electoral reelection success. And let me just say, I think we're going to do it again next week. So if you are a supporter of either of us on Patreon, and mine's patreon.com/Matt Lewis. What's yours?
Bill Scher. Patreon.com/Bill Scher.
Easy. So basically, mine supports my podcast. You will be invited whenever Bill and I do these Zoom calls, and I'm hoping we can do another one this coming week.
So getting right to the Biden point. So when we talked on Tuesday, he just done the podium speech in his basement library, or I think he called it his rec room. Since then, he's done other appearances where he's seated, not using the podium. Have you caught those? Do you have a sense of, you think his strategy is getting any better over the course of the week, or?
It's gotten slightly better. The optics are better, but I don't think he's been really relevant. I mean, Andrew Cuomo is actually much more, for obvious reasons, much more relevant. And I do fear, look, if you're Donald Trump, there's a lot of reasons to be worried right now, but I also feel like Biden has also taken a step backward in the past couple of weeks. The primary is effectively over, and it just seems like he's being overshadowed. And I don't think you could imagine maybe a younger, more tech-savvy person could have capitalized on this, but I don't know. I feel like he's less relevant. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's true. I think that's somewhat, inevitable, or there's not much you can do about that fact. I mean, there's a crisis going on, and he's not in a position of government to do something about the crisis directly. Andrew Cuomo is the governor of New York. He is in the state with the most amount of cases. There are things he has to do himself, and there's things he has to ask the federal government to do to help him, which puts him in a degree of tension and conflict with Trump, and that's a story. So there's not much Biden can do about that dynamic. Now, he did do, separate from his own media appearances, he did have the Ron Klain video. Ron Klain was his chief of staff as vice president. Klain was the Ebola czar, so he has direct experience with pandemics. And Klain gave a 4-minute clinic on what they did, what Trump did, what they should have done, and that video got over 4 million views. Like, that was, it wasn't Biden himself.
See, I didn't even, other than you, I didn't even hear about that video. I didn't see it. I didn't know about it. I will tell you, I heard Ron Klain on Ezra Klein's podcast a couple weeks ago, maybe a week ago, and he was fabulous, and I thought very impressive. But I didn't see Biden do this.
Well, you don't follow the same folks on Twitter that I do, and I imagine what gets shared in your Twitter feed is not the same as what gets shared in my Twitter feed. But I've heard universal, praise for that video, and it does show. I mean, Biden is not necessarily the most commanding of presences. Andrew Cuomo is a guy who really fills the room. He is a degree of bluster, a degree of arrogance. But with Cuomo, it's also been coupled with.
It's like if Al, not to be stereotypical, but I mean this as a compliment. It would be like if Pacino had this opportunity,
Right. Because Cuomo is
pretty endearing.
Cuomo's doing more facts and figures. He is clearly using the levers of bureaucracy in a much more productive way. He's not engaging in petty arguments the way Donald Trump is. So it's a very useful contrast for him and for Democrats generally. And Biden's strength/weakness is that even though he's been in government for nearly his entire adult life, he's kind of a regular guy. He talks like a regular guy. He meanders like a regular guy. He's not someone who's sort of positioned to be, better than you, who's in a more exalted place than you. So, for example, he has an interview on MSNBC that's very conversational, very chit-chatty. And, there's one time where he seems to kind of, you could look at it as sort of losing his chain of thought, but I think it was more just sort of a general exasperation with the state of the world and kind of hangs his head down and kind of shakes his head. And I see folks on the left and right clip that to make it seem like he's out of it. But when you watch the whole thing, it's more like he's just a regular guy who can't believe the giant, crisis and, cluster that we're in. And just to shake his head, they can't believe it. And so on one hand, I think that sort of makes him approachable. You can relate to him in a way that you don't with most professional politicians, but it's not as commanding. You're not in awe of him the way you might be in awe of a Cuomo.
I think that's true, but it just feels like Joe Biden went 30 years or whatever without winning a primary and in a presidential race. And then he wins in South Carolina and Super Tuesday, and he's the toast of the town, and he's the story. And that story has been dramatically overshadowed.
Well, sure, but what do you do about that?
Well, you got to adapt and overcome. But David Axelrod tweeted a couple of days ago, it was 1 week ago, that Joe Biden won Florida and all this stuff. And I'm like, that feels like it was 3 months ago.
It'll be a heck of a lot worse if Super Tuesday was some kind of split decision. And
True.
Then the pandemic hit. That would have been a real mess.
I just think they need to really get this figured out, don't you think? Look, again, Trump has major problems with the economy and with the fact that he botched the first couple months of the coronavirus, and he's on the record saying all those things. That it's going to disappear magically and all that. So Trump has real problems, but I think Biden has real problems too.
There are ads now on air by both Priorities USA, which is a longstanding Democratic super PAC, and Unite the Country, which is Biden's super PAC. They have ads which are, both of the same genre, all the things Trump said since January laid over the chart of the rising number of cases to show, in stark relief, Trump had his eye off the ball and was actively saying the opposite of what was really true, and not doing what he should have done. So, there's a certain concern in Democratic circles that, Trump's numbers are bumping up a little bit. Trump is commandeering the airwaves for a good number of hours every day. And even if you're a Democrat and you look at these appearances and you're horrified by them, the numeric evidence is that they're not hurting Trump. Maybe his numbers aren't going through the roof, but they're not getting worse. And that means that Biden and Democrats generally are not doing a good enough job at undercutting his narrative. That may be the case. It's a little bit of a fluid time, politically speaking, so I can't know if what's true in the polls today is going to be true a week from now. But you do have a concerted effort backed up by money on cable TV where you're seeing Trump in these appearances putting forth the counter narrative. So we'll see over time. I mean, I had a tweet about this. When Jimmy Carter had the Iran hostage crisis, which was also in the middle of the 1980 presidential primary, which Ted Kennedy was in the midst of a spirited challenge against Carter. Kennedy's campaign was grievously hampered because Carter had this enormous rally around the flag effect. He went from 31% approval to 57% over the span of 3 months from I think it was October to January, October 79 to or November 79 to early January, but then or late January, and then over the next 3 months that sunk back down below 40 after the crisis dragged on. I forget when the helicopter crash, the failed rescue mission was, if that was part of that decline or not. But the point is, we don't know how Trump looks a month, 2 months, 3 months. How long does this drag out? And if it does drag out, does he get the blame or do the governors get the blame? Trump could say, hey, I want to open things up by Easter, and they wouldn't let me, those bastards. There's so many uncertainties here that it's really hard to know how it all shakes out. But at minimum, there is a counter narrative being put forth by Biden himself in these media appearances and with an ad campaign.
Yeah, I think the ad campaign is probably more effective. You don't know the answer to this. I don't know the answer to this. I'm just curious, like, when are we going to get to go? When is this over? I mean, I don't know if the American people have the stomach for that much sacrifice. It's been, I don't know, a week or a month. It's time sort of runs together now. It's unclear to me how long I've been here, but what if it's a year that we're in this position? Like, how long can we do this?
Well, especially if you do ease up on the social distancing, it's more likely that it will be a year because the cases will spike and spread.
But the problem is the delay of people being symptomatic and all that. It's not like you go outside, people start dying, and you back off. It's hard to gauge what's working and what's not working, and to talk yourself into, oh, this is overblown, this is a hoax.
Well, especially when you have leaders saying opposite things.
Yeah.
You don't have people on the same page, Republican, Democrat, governor, president, mayor, saying the same thing. So you have people in the know telling you can't just trust what's going on in your anecdotal circle. We're doing aggressive testing. We're tracking the numbers. We know it's not quite safe to go outside and interact again. You got to sit tight. If you have a president giving you the opposite message, it's going to confuse the situation.
I think that's absolutely right. And again, I mean, this goes to like the fundamental failings of Donald Trump. It's not just specific policies, but it's that he has not engendered any sort of trust in his word, in his rhetoric. You just simply can't believe him or trust him. And so when he says something, and it does have consequences. Look, there's people who took the aquarium. What was that stuff that they ingested, thinking it was going to? I mean,
but there's a case of somebody who was trusting Trump. Remember, Trump is polarizing. There's some people that trust him a lot.
And that's my point. Is you can't completely blame Trump for what they did, but I don't think they would have done it if Trump had not said irresponsible and at the best case scenario, premature, but certainly irresponsible things publicly. I mean, his words have consequences, and it's not everybody who listens to him is going to be very discerning, right? And so I think he's very irresponsible and promiscuous with the things he says.
Well, I don't think it is simply a matter on the right of people believing things that are not true from people that they like. I certainly see on the left not something of this life or death nature, but I see people like Bernie Sanders or Ocasio-Cortez say things that are very oversimplified at times, to the point of not being accurate. And their supporters will just believe it, on face level. And even when there's a fact check, they reject the fact check as being overwrought or missing the point or what have you. They want to believe what they want to believe. They've developed a level of trust with certain people, and they're not going to be dissuaded otherwise. So that's something that can happen for people at any point in the ideological spectrum. You see it with centrists. You see people, repeat stuff from, Simpson, Bowles, deficit hawk types that have been disproven by what's happened in the past, several decades, and they can't get off of those talking points. So it's hardly a matter of just people on the extremes.
But I think it's a matter of degrees. I mean, Donald Trump has taken everything you said is true, but I think Donald Trump has taken it to a different level.
But here's a question I want to ask you, because it's not even just Trump. The president of Brazil is behaving in a very similar way, who even had coronavirus himself, and yet is still actively downplaying it and trying to present himself as some sort of superhuman, that even though he's over 6 years old, like he's an athlete, so he can't even be, fallen by it. I have a hard time understanding what it is about folks in this strain of the right that don't want to treat this as a public health crisis to mitigate as comprehensively and as fast as possible. Why do they see it somehow in their political interest to say things that make the problem worse and might get people who support them very sick and die? I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that.
Yeah, I can only theorize. In the case of Trump, obviously, he sees the economy as being the key to his reelection and something that he's always followed closely and sort of linked to his being a winner. And so anytime you shut down the economy, even if it's for social distancing to save lives, he doesn't like that. I think there's an ethos of masculinity and of action. And so doing something that's prudent and responsible is kind of the opposite of the bold, daring man of action. So, but at the end of the day, I think you're right. In the long run, if your supporters get sick or die because of your rhetoric or your policies, that's presumably eventually going to catch up to you. I think a lot of what's up with Trump has been that he has always gotten away with everything somehow, whether it's luck or magic or whatever. And I heard Ron Klain actually said this on Ezra Klein's podcast, but it's very true. You come to Trump and you say, hey man, you can't do this. because if you do it, you're not going to get elected. And he does it anyway, and he gets elected. And then you say, hey, man, you can't take out this Iranian general because it's going to be like a total shitstorm. And he says, like, I'm going to do it anyway. And he does it, and it doesn't lead to World War III. Like, everything he's done in his life is taking these big risks. And for some reason, it always pays off. So then you come to him and you say, hey, man, this coronavirus thing is going to be really bad. Like, you really need to take it seriously. We really need to, like, ramp up testing and yada, yada, yada. And he's like, why should he now listen to the experts? Because all he has done is defy the experts, tempt fate, take super risky, dangerous choices, and all he does is win. So why would this be different in his mind? I
just don't see why. What is the harm if you're a Trump to say the worst case scenario here is super bad? It's not just that a lot of people die. It also kills the economy and kills my reelection chances. Hey, Dr. Fauci, can you take care of this for me? So I can go play more golf. That takes a load off my mind.
That's not how he operates.
I mean, why?
So first of all, I think some of this is his short attention span and his desire for being at the center of attention. And so I don't think what you've described is a rather boring autopilot policy where things shut down, things calm down, we do the right thing, let the experts take over. And Trump's like, well, that's boring, man. This is this is a reality show. And like, if we stick to that script, that's super boring. I need to shake things up and start getting more attention. I'm bored.
I mean, that's what's so insane about this. I mean, there's been reporting that Trump literally is making decisions based on how do I get on TV more. I can't have a day go by where I'm not at the center of the news cycle. And so I'm going to have a 2-hour briefing where I'm going to just spout off things I don't know anything about just so
not only that, he's pushed them to prime time.
Right.
So it can't be like a 2 p.m. briefing anymore. It has to be like, he keeps pushing them later. Like on Sunday night, it was like around like just before 60 Minutes or something.
I mean, that's just depraved. And again, I don't know. And I don't know if we're going to react to this in the way I think. I mean, some people are going to react to it the way I'm reacting to it. And this, if I may, I might segue into my Politico piece about the socialists and coronavirus. I think for a lot of people, the pandemic is a harsh reminder that, oh yeah, you do want people in government who are experienced to handle things like crises. You don't want narcissistic amateurs who are going to make decisions based on how do I get on TV more. Otherwise, I'm going to be trapped in my house, or my partner's going to die, or I'm going to die, or my kids are going to go to school again. It's going to literally impact my day-to-day life. But of course,
I saw Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush apparently gave I just saw the headline or something, but Jeb Bush apparently gave an interview to the Dispatch where he said that one of the changes that's going to come from coronavirus is that we're going to have more of an appreciation for experts and experience. And I hope if something good comes out of it, I hope that's true.
I hope
the
that's
other
true.
thing I think there's going to be young people today who we never, we looked at like, there was a thing where like police are heroes and firemen are heroes, but you never think of doctors or scientists as being heroes. Mm-hmm. But I think that's changing a little bit too. I think there may be young people today who are watching this play out, who are going to have some role models who are scientists and doctors now. Yeah. That could be a good thing.
I mean, that's, but also, truckers, also grocery store employees. There are a lot of social service people that can't, just stay at home. There's all sorts of people that don't have.
They're heroes. They're heroes too, but I don't think that they're being glamorized right now the way that the scientists and the doctors are.
Certainly, no question, and rightly so. But I have heard some piece about some news pieces about other folks. I heard a piece about truckers on CNN where, the truckers are acutely aware they're on the front lines and taking big risks and have to do it just to make ends meet, but feel like they are doing something to keep the economy going. They are aware of their larger place in society. And
let's not forget the brave political columnists who bring us our takes every day.
Speaking of, so I had a piece in Politico, essentially saying that our Democratic Socialist friends aren't reading the room here, because if you listen to Bernie or Bernie's aides or other supporters of him in the folks who give the socialist hot takes. Jacobin and Current Affairs and the like, they take all this stuff as you and I are looking at this as this clearly shows the value of expertise in government. Their takeaway is this shows the value of democratic socialism. This shows the failures of late stage capitalism. This shows the failures of a private health insurance system. And you see repeatedly these very blunt assertions that obviously Medicare for all would be helping us right now, and I think where this has missed the mark. One is at the literal level, which is Italy and Spain right now are getting hammered, and they have single-payer systems. That's not mean single-payer is why they're getting hammered. It's not the fault of single-payer. They have very good healthcare systems otherwise. They are good examples to show that, say, single-payer can do good things. But there's nothing about them that ensures aggressive testing or tracking of patients or isolation or good social distancing practices or anything like that, or making sure you have enough hospital beds or PPE. You can screw those things up in a single payer system or a private health insurance system. You need to have good government public health leaders to ensure that you have good policies that prevent these kinds of problems. So I think they're just sort of missing that basic take, that basic analysis of the situation. And the second thing more broadly is I think they're not grasping the human reaction to this. Most people in a crisis are not eager to see ideologues exploit the crisis to push their ideology. They're eager to see their leaders address the crisis. You have people on the left who hate Andrew Cuomo praising Andrew Cuomo because it looks like he's taking charge in a crisis. And it is possible for Democratic Socialists to behave in a way like Andrew Cuomo. Now, granted, if you're a governor, if you're not a governor, you're not a mayor, you're not a president, that's harder. It's the Joe Biden problem. But you could be talking more about, especially if you're Bernie, here's what I would be doing as president to address the crisis, to contain the spread of the pandemic, where most of what Bernie talks about is the economic relief he would be offering and the pushing of Medicare for all. And it's not that those things are irrelevant. I mean, there are ways to make it relevant to the situation, but you don't get that sense from Bernie. Yeah. Oh, if he was in charge here, I would have, I mean, not they never mentioned social distancing or testing or anything like that, but it's always kind of cursory.
Well, now you have to hammer every problem's a nail, right? I mean, and that's what Bernie's doing.
You have to wait.
I would say,
hold on one sec, Matt.
Sure.
Why don't you work on some reading and writing, and I'll give this to you when I can.
Wait, Mom is using her work computer. I can just use hers, right?
If you can get on Clever through hers, but it would set up here and.
Fine, I'll just use that one when you're ready.
Okay.
How long is that gonna take?
15 minutes.
What do you do, art now and then math later? No, I don't want to do math now.
This is her math time, and she needs my computer for math time.
Oh, that's okay. We should probably cut it soon anyway. I have to go check on my
But anyway,
kids.
I've got some blast of of anger from socialist Twitter that I'm not reading the room, and I'm a flack for the neoliberal corporate state and the like, and it just has really amplified the notion that I think Bernie world is really siloed right now. I think they're really just not in the same space as everyone else. It's not just about the crisis response. It's also Bernie saying, I'm ready for the next debate. I'm putting in staff, and we can still win New York. We're putting in staff in Pennsylvania. Biden's response is so bad, this could still fall apart for him. And I think they're just not getting where we are right now. This doesn't necessarily mean I think he is morally obligated to drop out, but I just get a sense from his team, his supporters. They're just living in another political space right now that the rest of the country is not in.
Yeah. I will say, going to Cuomo, like what he is doing, and put aside the policies, put aside the ideology, it's just leadership. I mean, if you've read Patton on leadership, Reagan on leadership, John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, Stephen Covey's books, I mean, that whole genre, Dale Carnegie, whatever, self-help, leadership, motivational. Maybe it's great coaches, Tom Landry, Bill Parcells, I mean, Joe Gibbs, whatever it is. I mean, there's a way of being a leader, and it involves servant leadership. It involves it does involve rhetoric. It involves character. It involves telling the truth. I mean, like all those things Cuomo is delivering, and I think Trump doesn't. And there's this great episode of The Simpsons where, Bill, you're a Simpsons fan, right?
I am, yes.
The Frank Grimes episode?
I'm not as big a fan as you, so remind me.
Grimy Frank Grimes. So there's a guy who is kind of a pull yourself up by his bootstraps young guy named Frank Grimes, who gets hired at the nuclear power plant, and he really knows everything inside and out, and he is appalled by Homer Simpson's safety violations, and that Homer has a better job than him, has a beautiful wife and a house, and has been an astronaut somehow. And Grimes cannot understand how Homer Simpson just keeps winning at life. And eventually Grimes dies. You'd have to watch the episode, but somehow he kills himself by pretending to be Homer. And the ultimate insult is that I guess at his funeral, Homer refers to him as Grimy, which is a nickname that Grimes hated. But anyway, I feel like that's how Trump is. He's defying everything that I know about leadership and communications from studying Reagan and everybody else. And yet, there's a percentage of people who love it and think he's like the bee's knees. I don't get it.
And it could well be that by November, no matter what happens with the pandemic, that it just doesn't move the needle all that much, that people's opinions of Trump are just fixed. You love him or you hate him. I mean, so we had polls, his approval numbers ticked up. It's now, I think, more in the mid to upper 40s as opposed to the low to mid 40s. And when you ask, do you approve of his coronavirus response, that's over 50.
Yeah.
And
I think he could be Herbert Hoover or he could be FDR.
Well, right.
It's
it is still possible. This could still just collapse on him. That this could just go very, very badly, totally. And everything the bomb falls out. Yeah. But not ever seen that happen with any other, nuclear political development over the past 3.5 years. I'm not going to expect that. You had a poll that came out this week from Monmouth where Biden was up by 3, which to many will seem too close for comfort. It's not all that different than the margin Hillary had over Trump and still lost the Electoral College. But we also had a poll out of Michigan where Biden was beating Trump by 3. And this was with the inclusion of a someone else option. So someone else got 6%. And that's arguably a high watermark for if you were a Bernie or Buster, you might say someone else. You don't have to worry about if it's a green or libertarian person or who that person is. So even with that factor in there, he was still winning by 3, and you might still say that's hardly taken to the bank. But Trump did win Michigan by less than 1 percentage point. So if Biden wins by 3, a win's a win. So if he's still winning at a period where Trump is arguably at his high water mark, and also I should add, in that Monmouth poll, they did a subset of people in swing counties, and Biden did better in swing counties than he did nationally. He won by 9 points in swing counties as opposed to 3 points nationally. So as of this moment, there's not a lot of evidence that Biden is weaker in the swing states relative to his performance nationally, unlike the case for Hillary. So it may be that even if we are in a fixed place and nothing moves the needle, the needle's in a place that's still, on the whole, better for Biden.
Indeed. All right. So, maybe we're looking for silver linings here. We should have been doing these Zoom calls years ago. This Zoom is having a moment. I wish I'd invested in them a couple months ago. But I think that it's smart that we are now. And if you've been listening, maybe you're a DMZ fan, you've been listening to us for a long time. Let's be honest, for free. And you want to chat with us and be part of the conversation, this is your chance. And I'm hoping we can do one of these next week.
No, I hope to as well. And I'm happy to do them. I like doing them with you. I do have to say, on the whole, I hate Zoom. I hate having to do online meetings. I work out of the house. I don't have to do meetings. Yes. I've tried to social distance for a long time. And I in the last real job I had, I worked at an organization for about 10 years, and for 9.5 of them, everything was phone-based conference call, and then we got taken over by another outfit, which was more national, had lots of affiliates, and then all of a sudden I'm in these Zoom meeting, nationwide calls with like 24 boxes, and I can't do something else in this meeting. I would have meetings where, I'm going to make myself some breakfast. I'm going to, if I'm not directly involved in this part of the meeting, I'm going to go read some news. Now I got to stare at the screen and not move an eyebrow.
Well, apparently there's a way to override it and just put a fake clip of you up, on loop.
But if you're in a work meeting, that's a little too obvious,
No, look, here's my whole thing about this. Zoom is awesome if it's optional. If you, last night, me and Jamie Weinstein and Will Ron, my buddies from the Daily Caller, at 4:00, talked for an hour on Zoom and had multiple drinks. But that was completely voluntary and fun. But if it's compulsory, then it becomes work, and I think it's invasive. They're coming into your house. And that we have to take a stand against. I agree. But this is different, Bill. This is if you want to talk, if you want to see and chat with Matt and Bill, and I did one with historian David Petrugia that I was able to repurpose into a podcast, actually. We took the audio and ran it this week on my podcast. So that I think is fun. But yeah, the meeting thing, if it's a meeting, that's bad. We can agree.
Before we wrap up, one more plug. In addition to my Politico piece about which is no coronavirus does not prove the need for socialism. I also have a piece up at Real Clear Politics about Biden and young voters. It is largely assumed that Biden's weak with young voters, and I go through the data to show that that is not necessarily the case. He's actually doing pretty well with young voters, at least as good as Hillary, and in most polls better. So check that out at Real Clear Politics. Anything you got to plug, Matt?
Yeah, just keep reading my stuff at the Daily Beast. Keep me gainfully employed, and click the ads, please.
All right. Till next week, perhaps on Zoom as well as here at the DMZ.
We'll see you, hopefully, in both places next week. Thanks, Bill.
Right.